This is Behind the Headlines, with behind-the-scenes analysis on issues affecting Pennsylvanians, sponsored by the Susquehanna Valley Center for Public Policy. Now, here's your host.
Hi, from Philadelphia to Erie and from Scranton to Pittsburgh, it's Behind the Headlines. I'm Charlie Greenewalt, Senior Fellow of the Susquehanna Valley Center for Public Policy, and I'm joined by my co-host, Mara Donnelly, as usual. Hi, Mara.
Hello, Charlie.
So you were at the Pennsylvania Society.
Yes, I was.
And what was new and different there?
More people, a lot more people. I think people are finally coming out of their houses and their shells from after COVID. So it was nice to see big crowds again.
And you're not back. We're not back in the Waldorf Astoria completely.
Not yet. Rumor is that we'll be back there in 2023. But we'll see what happens. That would be awesome.
Well, and we're lucky enough to have with us today someone who's a great veteran of Pennsylvania Society meetings. I don't know if he was there this year, we'll ask, but we're lucky enough to have with us Dave Sanko, who's the Executive Vice President of the Pennsylvania State Association of Township Supervisors. Dave, welcome to the show.
Thanks for the invite.
Were you at the
I was not. I
Pennsylvania
was
Society?
sadly was planning on being there, but I was a little under the weather Friday, Saturday, so I took the weekend off.
Well, I think your attendance in a number of years is more than the number of fingers and toes I have. So I think you know the Pennsylvania Society very well and
We
what
missed
they
you.
do.
Oh, thank you. Miss being there.
I'm going to give you to Mara to start us off.
Well, we just got through an election. We've got a new governor-elect coming in and a lot of changes. What kind of expectations do you have of the new governor?
Well, I think we're cautiously optimistic. The Governor-elect Shapiro has indicated his administration is going to be reflective of Pennsylvania, of all of Pennsylvania, of rural and urban, and large communities, small communities, east, west. And we take him at his word that he's going to build an administration like that. I think governors come to town with the best of intentions, and I think and leave town with the best of intentions.
Reality
as well.
hits.
But at the end of the day, I think a lot is determined by who they surround themselves with. And so we'll be watching the appointments as they unfold.
The transition teams are interesting already. A lot of diversity on there, so that's good to see.
A lot, yes, very much a lot of diversity. And Governor Wolf was an honest governor who did what he believed was best, and perhaps maybe got some advice from folks around him who maybe didn't know Pennsylvania as well as he did.
Mm-hmm.
But I think Governor-elect Shapiro has spent a fair amount of time traveling the Commonwealth, spent time serving as the chief law enforcement officer, and I think is well versed with what makes Pennsylvania communities tick and what you have to do to keep them safe.
Well, Dave, the outcome of some of the state legislative races still seems to be in limbo. We don't know if the state house is Republican or Democratic. How does this affect your association and your activities?
Well, I think that the reforms that the local governments are looking for are not reforms that have that are Republican or Democrat solutions. Those are common sense reforms that everybody should agree with, regardless of party affiliation. And we've seen, Harrisburg over the years with one party control. We've seen Harrisburg with split control, and it works both ways. And we're anxious to work with the new leadership teams and move forward for the betterment of all Pennsylvanians.
One of the issues that your organization works on all the time is broadband access. Can you tell us a little bit about what the new FCC coverage maps are and what the impact is on Pennsylvania?
Sure. In a word, terrible.
Oh.
I think. I guess I'd start off with this: if Pennsylvanians are comfortable in trusting the federal government to make sure you have broadband access, then you don't have to do anything. But if you're not sure about that, then you need to go and take a look at that FCC map, and because that map is going to be what's used to determine the allocation of resources and money, and how that broadband is going to be deployed across the country. Take a look at that map and type in your address and see what it says about your house. And I will just use two examples. For my office building, I can look out my window and see the new Penn State Hospital. And on the other side of the road, I can see the new UPMC West Shore Hospital. The Penn State Hospital is listed on the FCC map as a single-family home.
Oh, no.
The West Shore Hospital is listed as a duplex. Now, I will tell you, I believe anyway, that the broadband capacity that's going to be needed to run those two large facilities is significantly more than a single-family home.
Or a duplex.
Or a duplex.
Yeah.
And I think that, that's, I think, a reason to take, for everybody to take a look at the map and help refine the map and make it right, because, billions of dollars are going to be spent based on that, and right now they're going to say, we don't need anything there. So all across Pennsylvania, and I think, Penn State, the agriculture people, and the Pennsylvania Broadband Authority are going to do their level best, but you can file challenges until January 13th. It's only a 60-day window. They put the map together in 60 days. It's hard for me to believe in this day and age that there isn't pre-existing satellite technology.
Exactly, that's what I was thinking.
We're all driving around.
Put a few drones out there.
Sure. We all drive around with our car, and whether we have a GPS locator or satellite radio, at some point a little box will come on or an X will come on and say you've lost signal with a satellite.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure the satellite knows that they've lost signal with that vehicle. So I'm pretty sure somebody knows what a map looks like for where there's coverage and where there isn't coverage, and we ought to use some of that technology
So
to
individuals
help make sure.
can go on and
Individuals
look
can
at
log
their
on,
area and
type in their
file.
address, type in any address.
Okay.
It will bring up the map for your neighborhood, and it'll tell you. It'll put a color on your dot. If it's blue, they think you're good to go. If it's gray, they're not sure, and if it's red, there's a problem. And there ought to be a lot more red on that map.
Okay, great. Oh, I'm going to do that when I get home. How about you, Charlie?
Well, I think our viewers are the first to know. Dave's let the cat out of the bag. He has the best medical care in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, a hospital on either
two
side
hospitals.
of it. Oh, you are set, Dave.
But they don't have broadband.
yeah.
Well, and
That's going to be a problem.
The one thing that's true is the doctors and nurses have to be able to get to the hospital, and that brings up the whole issue of transportation funding. Transportation funding has always been so important and so hotly contested in the Commonwealth. What's happening on this front with the new federal money that's coming to Harrisburg?
Sure. I don't know that I ever recall a time when there's been more money available for transportation projects. Sadly, most of that money is being geared towards building new projects instead of. Right now, all of the current transportation projects are having extraordinary cost overruns because of inflation, because of supply chain, because of just the costs of workers, cost of doing all those things. And rather than using that extra money to finish the projects you have and the cost overruns you have, we're starting new projects, which I guess at the end of the day in some ways is beneficial, but at the end of the day it means we're going to get to a point in the future where we have a whole bunch of unfinished projects and not enough money to get it done.
So what kind of new projects? New roads?
I think new roads that long roads that have been long on a design board.
Okay.
I had the opportunity to serve on the Transportation Revenue Options Commission with Governor Wolf's crew, and we identified $8 billion of state need and $5 billion of local need. Well, that $13 billion is now on cost escalators, is up to about $20 billion. And none of this money is being used on that. It's all being used on future projects. So we've got to figure out how we're going to fund transportation projects moving forward.
Wow. So one of the issues related to diminished funds being available is the growth in electric vehicles, because they do not pay the gas tax in Pennsylvania. Sure. So in general terms, what does local government feel about the use of electric vehicles?
Sure. I think a couple things. One, you correctly point out that the gas tax is diminishing. So it's diminishing because vehicles are becoming more fuel efficient. Those that do use gas or diesel becoming more fuel efficient, so there's less fuel being purchased. And people are also switching to alternate vehicles, so there's less and less money to fix those roads. And for local governments, that's the only source of money to fix those roads is from the liquid fuels, their share of the gas tax, or local property taxes. So if Harrisburg is not going to be helping local governments maintain those local roads, and local governments maintain about 2/3 of all the roads in Pennsylvania, and they only get about $500 million from the state annually. The rest comes from property taxes. So if Harrisburg is not going to help make sure there's responsible funding, then local property taxes are going to have to go up. And I don't think anybody thinks that's a good idea.
Are local governments investing in electric vehicles?
So I think there are, when I was growing up, somebody told me that the road to hell is paved with good intentions. And I think as we look at electric vehicles, there are some positives to doing that, but there are some challenges.
Those batteries.
As we look into it. The batteries are heavy, so the vehicles weigh more, so they do more road damage. The batteries are, designed to have precious metals that have to be mined somewhere else. They're incredibly expensive, and they're hazardous, toxic waste when they're done. And by the way, if they catch fire today, they put first responders at a tremendous disadvantage because they burn hotter and release toxic emissions that are not common to normal firefighters. So they've even said that if an electric battery fire, the firefighters have to stay with the vehicle for 6 hours after the fire goes out because of the ability to
Who's
reignite.
going to pay for that? Who's going to pay for that?
And
Dave?
somebody's going to pay for it. So they reignite.
Wow.
So I mean, I've seen a video of an electric car being towed down the road after, and it reignites while it's on the back of the tow truck, just because of the heat from those chemicals.
Oh, by the way, where's the electricity coming from to run all these cars?
And yes,
interesting stuff. We're tearing down our hydroelectric dams.
Sure.
We're closing our atomic energy plants.
We could do a whole
We're
show on
closing our
this.
coal
Yeah.
fired plants.
Yeah.
Where's the energy going to come from?
And I think municipalities want to be partners in helping to make sure there's a clean environment. But I also think that when residents when you're in the middle of the winter, they want the roads plowed. And I'm not sure when plows are driving 24 hours a day, it's a lot quicker to fuel them up than it is to pull them off the road and plug them in for a couple days. And by the way, last time I checked, a lot of times in the winter when there's storms, the power goes out. So then there's no power to even charge to
we won't
trucks.
even talk about the domestic terrorism that occurred just in North Carolina on a substation, and whether or not that's going to be something that the Commonwealth has to worry about. Dave, in the last 45 seconds, can you tell us about your upcoming annual conference?
So 2023 is going to be our 100th conference.
Wow.
So, which is a very
Congratulations.
exciting milepost.
100 years.
The association was 100 years old a couple of years ago. Obviously, didn't have conferences in the first couple of years, but we're very excited about the prospect of bringing together those local government leaders, many of whom are going to be on the ballot this year. While the big elections are just over, the most important elections are just about to start with the local elections. But we're going to bring them together and teach them the shared best practices and common sense solutions for how they can provide quality services to their residents at affordable prices.
Dates?
April 23rd to 26th in Hershey.
At the Hershey Motor
At
Lodge?
the Hershey Lodge, yes.
Motor Lodge. Nobody calls it that.
Oh, I don't know. Do you live in Hershey?
Yeah, I did for a while.
And Dave, you haven't been the executive director of the Association for the whole 100 years.
Not for the full 100 years. I've just started my 14th year, though.
Congratulations.
That's awesome.
Yeah, well, congratulations
Thank you.
on everything. And we look forward to hearing about the conference. And stay tuned for the next segment of Behind the Headlines. We'll be right back.
Behind the Headlines is brought to you as a public service by the Pennsylvania State Association of Township Supervisors, the largest, most influential municipal association in the Commonwealth. Since 1921, PSATS has been preserving and strengthening township government and securing greater visibility and involvement for townships in the state and federal political arenas. Covering 95% of Pennsylvania's land mass, townships represent 5.5 million residents, more than any other type of political subdivision in Pennsylvania. Additional underwriting provided by the Worrell Corporation Foundation, based in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, by the Edward H. and Jeannie Arnold Foundation, and by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business. Behind the Headlines is also supported as a public service by the Pennsylvania Highway Information Association, the go-to source to learn about transportation projects and issues. Visit pahighwayinfo.org.
Hi, welcome back to Behind the Headlines. On this segment of Behind the Headlines, Maura and I are joined by Bob Latham, who is the Executive Vice President of the Associated Pennsylvania Constructors. Bob, welcome back to the program.
Good to be with you both.
Well, you are one of the best persons in the Commonwealth to speak to about one of the most important topics in the Commonwealth perennially, and that, of course, is transportation. We find that transportation was a big issue during the recent midterm elections, wasn't it?
Absolutely, yes. Transportation is an issue that affects everybody. And whether you leave your house or not, you're dependent on roads for all the goods that come to your house and consumer goods and that sort of thing. And that's making it even a greater issue as we have more and more of a distribution economy here in Pennsylvania and throughout the nation.
And finally, there's been a little bit of improvement in the diversion of money to the state police, right?
We've talked about this over many years, and we're very encouraged with that issue. Yes, last year Governor Wolf proposed a decrease, if you will, of the amount of gas tax money and user fees that people are paying for road improvements that were actually being sent over to the general fund to pay for the operations of the state police. And the governor proposed a drop of $175 million. And so that is still at about that $500 million level, which is again equal to about 8 cents of our gas tax. So we're hopeful to finally take that down to zero. I've got a couple of encouraging signs on that this year during the most recent gubernatorial campaign. Governor-elect Josh Shapiro made that a point on his transportation plank, I guess, if you will, taking that down to zero. And I like his approach. I like his approach.
Well, we have to ask, what is his approach? Where is he going to find the money to replace it for the state police?
His approach is basically, let's fund law enforcement properly.
Okay.
And that's not just the state police, but local law enforcement as well. Now, to answer your question, I don't know the answer to that question, but obviously we have a general fund surplus. We still have some money left over from the COVID money, I guess, if you will. So we have resources in the general fund to do that. So I mean, I like the governor-elect's approach in that rather than pit state police versus road improvements and in a zero-sum game, let's go ahead and fund law enforcement as it's very much needed, and that in itself will free up the money for highway improvements, which will be very important because we also have to come up with some additional matching funds at the state level in order to fully access federal money
funding,
that's available through the National Highway Trust Fund.
Well, I think every time we see you, we talk about electric vehicles and the impact that they have been having on our funding. What's the latest? Are any alternatives coming? Getting support?
The latest, I think, is we've recently had some conversation with the new Senate Majority Leader Joe Pittman about that issue. It's very high on his list of things to do once and for all. And so we're going to see some leadership out of the Senate on that issue. And so we have to look at things like potentially a registration fee that would be higher for those vehicles than for gasoline powered or diesel powered vehicles to sort of offset that differential in tax that the owners of those vehicles are not paying. The other is a potential gross receipts tax that could be applied when charging electric vehicles, and one of the points is that we see more and more there's a subsidy. In other words, our government is actually subsidizing the ownership, I guess, and operation of electric vehicles. When you think about it, when the internal combustion engine car was created the United States government didn't go out and pay for Standard Oil to build gas stations throughout the country, which is essentially what we're doing. We're in Pennsylvania alone. We've got a $178 million subsidy to erect charging stations in various places around the Commonwealth. And I think
They are popping up everywhere.
Yeah.
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 It's interesting.
So, I mean, that's fine, but then the owners of those vehicles aren't paying any road user fees. So I think that'll be part and parcel of the discussion as well as we go forward. But I do want to go back again, mentioning Senator Pittman. He was the champion of moving that diversion of money from the motor license fund and stopping that diversion of money from the motor license fund to the general fund for the state police. And again, mentioned in conversation with a number of business groups recently that he's interested in moving that to zero. So maybe there's a point of
support
the point
in the legislature
yeah.
and in the governor's
Maybe
office.
we're hopeful that maybe that's something that the new governor can strike up a bipartisan working relationship
Yeah.
with the General Assembly on right
So
away.
you
Get
might
a
be
big win for
You
everybody.
might be doing a little dance after this next budget.
Bob, how
You don't
long
wanna
has
see that.
how long has that diversion been going on?
Oh my gosh, that goes back into the 20, 30 years when I actually, back in the early 2000s, it was at about $150 million, and then it started to creep up, and it hit its high water mark around 2016 at about 800 million. So I mean, we are seeing that progress. The other thing about that issue is the public is very much attuned to it. They're very much aware of it, and they very much favor paying gas taxes for road improvements and not to have them siphoned off for ostensibly a general fund issue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I just wondered what administration had begun this, and what was the argument that was put out at the time to justify it, and how did it continue?
Well, they needed funding.
Doesn't everyone?
I think it started in earnest during the Ridge administration,
Okay.
and quite frankly, then just started to kind of creep up. It was a very bipartisan thing that had happened. So we had Republican-controlled legislatures that worked with Governor Ed Rendell, to kind of ramp it up. When Act 89 passed in 2013, the Corbett administration brought in a pretty big boost that was then approved by the General Assembly, and then Governor Wolf thought it was a great idea, and the General Assembly worked with him to raise it up even further. So you can't really point to one administration or one group. It was a joint effort by both political parties and elected officials. But again, going back, looking at, I would say, Senator Pittman, Senator, now retired Senator Jake Corman, and a number of other people worked very hard, and I think, we have to give some kudos to Governor Wolf and his outgoing budget to really have an impact and bring it down.
So, true confession time. I got nabbed speeding in one of the speed zones. And it's never going to happen again, but it happened. And I could see where people are making arguments for and against it, from a safety perspective, from a revenue-raising perspective. Tell us what you think. What you think about it?
So what we're talking about here are what we call cameras in the work zones, or speed cameras in the work zones,
or getting nabbed.
It's a system that we first observed in Maryland. It's very effective. If you're traveling in Maryland, you can see the speeds go down as you enter highway work zones. We've had it now in Pennsylvania for 5 years. The difference in Pennsylvania is if you paid a fine, Maura, then that means it was not your first time.
I did not pay a fine.
Okay,
I am a first-time offender,
okay,
and
well,
I said it will not happen again.
Then you just got a warning because they do get rather expensive
Yes.
as they go on. But in Pennsylvania, you get a warning. frankly, we'd like to remove that because what we think we're seeing is that people really kind of go, you know, it's just a warning. So
They don't know what's coming if they do it again? Is that what's
Right.
happening? Oh, goodness.
So we'd like to see that.
It's
We
not
want to
good.
take, we
It's
want to
very
take the
expensive.
sunset off of it. We want to expand it further. We do believe it is having a positive impact on speeds. And quite frankly, speeding and reckless driving has really gotten to be a bad situation. And you know, I was able to come on here a couple of years ago in 2019 and report that in 2018 we had fewer fatalities, highway fatalities, car crashes, than in the history of that statistic. When you think about the growth in driving in, you know, over 100 years, that was pretty remarkable. Well, when COVID hit, I think everybody kind of lost their mind, and anecdotally, you see a problem there. So anything we can do to reduce speeds and have people drive more safely through highway work zones can be very positive.
Well, that particular program, the automated speed enforcement program, is modeled on Maryland, and Maryland's been using it, Bob, since 2010, as you've probably shared with us before.
Right.
And in 2010 in Maryland, 7% of all vehicles were going 12 miles per hour or faster in the construction zone, but over time it's dropped to less than 1% with progress. So are we hoping for that same type of progress?
I think we are. I mean, again, a little bit more expansion of the program, a little more teeth in it, and continued use, and we'll see the same positive impact here as they did in Maryland.
And so it ends up not actually being a revenue raiser.
Exactly.
Because it has dropped off.
The intent is that we would have a time when we would have 0 fines recorded by those cameras because everybody is driving the speed limit through work zones.
Well, in the last 30 seconds, Pennsylvania is taking a good hard look at procurement, particularly in procurement and transportation. We used to have, we traditionally have had competitive bidding. What else is out there? What might happen?
So, and again, we're looking at ways to modernize, streamline, and do things better, faster, and cheaper, and get it done. And in some cases, we have complicated projects where we can combine the design and construction contract into one. It's not for every project. It would be used on a minimal basis, but we see a value in that to the consumer.
And that will speed up the whole process.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's
so
great.
We'll get it done faster and have private sector innovation in the design and construction of projects.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Bob, for coming and updating us on transportation. We appreciate it, and we will appreciate the opportunity to be with you again next week on Behind the Headlines. We'll see you then.